I'll talk a little bit about myself. My name is Anderson Rangel, and it's my absolute pleasure to be hosting this webinar and addressing such pivotal topic for organizations that are looking to gaining a higher level of efficiency while remaining or becoming compliant with the growing demands of regulations around data privacy. Throughout my career, I have worked with SQL as a database administrator, as a database developer. I've scratched the surface of data analytics and business intelligence realm. And now, as a pre-sales engineer here at Redgate, I have the privilege to be able to help our customer base and our community throughout the use of our solutions. And also by advocating for the adoption of the end-to-end best practices around database development lifecycle, which we also refer to as Compliant Database DevOps. So for those of you that are still not aware, since October last year, Redgate has opened an office in Australia, so we can be even more responsive and influential in terms of elevating the quality of the database DevOps practices here in the APAC region. Not only for our customer base, but also for our community. So a little bit about our agenda. I'm personally invested in our topic today because I have literally experienced most, if not all, of the challenges and limitations that we are about to discuss from all possible angles. So as a DBA, it was my responsibility to provision all the pre-prod environments to make sure that all the obfuscation scripts and functions were created and applied, so the data could be anonymized as much as possible. So I definitely sympathize with anyone experiencing challenges regarding this massive amount of time that the whole process can take, and which, depending on the size and scope and complexity, it could actually take days, if not weeks, to get that those environments provisioned. I guess another responsibility was to do with managing the storage capacity limitations of multiplying my databases, as well as keeping track of which copies were deployed where and when. So provisioning safe environments manually is a very lengthy process. It is troublesome. There is no audit trail, and like any other repetitive multi-stepped manual tasks, is very error prone. But that's only one side of the story. So as a dev, on the vast majority of the times, I have worked with shared development environments, which due to the limitations I have just mentioned, it always felt like I was stepping on eggshells. So imagine I do something that would destroy that environment or enable that environment. So all that reprovisioning would have to take place, and not even going to go too deep into the frustration when someone override my code. So I guess one of the most limiting elements was to having to work with synthesized data or subsets of data, which made bug fixing and performance testing nearly impossible, or at least inaccurate and inefficient. So I guess we can all agree that if possible, we would much rather work on production data, and we will talk about that before too long. So I'm also seeing this list of challenges now through the lenses of the business. So imagine having a solution that dramatically optimizes the efficiency of both dev and ops team, enhancing their performance, enhancing collaboration, making better use of infrastructure resources, and becoming compliant with the data privacy legislations that regulates us. And so all this combined, it's a very attractive opportunity, and in my opinion, it's a must-have one. And all these needs and challenges that I have just very briefly touched bases on are delivered with such simplicity and geniality by SQL Provision, which as we go along, I'll describe and demonstrate in practical terms, not only how it works, but how it can add immense value and immediate return of investment to your business. So all that to get us into one understanding, and that is, why do we need to develop and test using realistic and safe data, and how can we achieve that? So let's dive in. In terms of, so the first thing that I chose for us to discuss about is around compliance, which is probably one of the biggest drives for anyone or everyone that's listening and watching this webinar. So I'll open up this topic with the latest results of the SQL Server Database Provision report, which, by the way, is a great read to gain better understanding about the trends and drives around this topic worldwide. So I'll post a link to it in the comments later. When we asked if it is desirable to use production data in dev and test, we had 83% of the attendees or interviewees agreeing that having that production data in those environments would be preferable. The drives for that are quite clear, isn't it? Like, since we're working with synthesized and subsets of data, directly influences the performance and the test accuracy because of the data distribution is skewed, and density is messed with as well, and the very structure of the data is different. So it does mess up with the query plans. It affects index utilization. It messes up with statistics. So it's very common to see lots of false positives being produced in that situation. And then we have the evolution from the, it works on my computer to, but it works fine in dev. So we definitely want to move away from that situation. Other elements like bug hunting in synthesized data or subsets of data is extremely inefficient. And sometimes actually it's impossible depending on the nature of the bug. So I guess what I'm trying to say here is that deving and testing on copies of production are obviously the most accurate and reliable way to perform the whole spectrum of the pre-prod activities. And to tie it up with that, we have also asked who was still doing copy down live data from prod, which alarmingly, but I would say not surprisingly from what I've seen around on my consulting days, 72% of businesses are still restoring raw production backups into their lower environments. So we understand that working with production data in non-prod environments would be ideal. Then the fundamental question is, why is that such bad practice? And the answer for that, it's quite straightforward, actually. It's to do with compliance and governance around data privacy. There are a number of regulatory legislations around the world, and you probably heard of SOX, GDPR, HIPAA, PCI, SHIELD, CCPA, the list goes on, and it's increasing quite rapidly. Australia, where I'm talking from now, it regulates its data privacy and protection guidelines through a mix of federal, states, and territory laws. But fundamentally, what we have is governed by the Federal Privacy Act and the AP, the Australian Privacy Principles. And by the way, these changes around legislation seems to get tighter as data breaches continue to come to light. So tighter in terms of penalties, as well as the expected level of demonstrated governance around your policies, your processes. So a large portion of the breaches are still coming from hacking, but I guess, so as analyzing the results that we see from various reports, we can see that data breaches are still coming from hacking, but guess which environments they rather attack, like the fully bounded and secure production, or the not so closely maintained pre-prods? The answer is quite obvious, isn't it? So what we're seeing is a large number of high-profile government agencies and established organizations having their data breached due to or internal actors performing malicious acts, or sometimes, most of the times, unintended acts. But nevertheless, it's a breach. One example of that, it's like Bunnings Warehouse, which it's one of the biggest Australian brands in Australia, obviously, that on the beginning of this month reported that one of their staff took a copy of one of the store's database to do some work from home, and personal data and employees on employees and vendors ended up leaking and breached into the dark web. So more than ever, we have organizations racing to implement or mature their data governance process in order to avoid the misuse of its data and meet legislative requirements. So what we're seeing here in this slide, it's a topic that is quite central across all regulations, and that is the fact that data protection needs to be done by design and by default. So making the masking and the encrypting of personal data as standard practice on your business rather than an occasional one-off exercise. So if you do that, the worry about whether or not the data privacy requirements and regulations are being followed will disappear. And we also have the understanding around accountability, which in terms of around accountability, if data masking is the norm rather than the exception, then compliance with these elements of any data privacy regulation can be demonstrated immediately. And as you can see on this slide, so 39 of the 99 GDPR articles are requiring evidence about the demonstration of that compliance. So it's not just a matter of saying, yes, I do comply. It's a matter of showing how you comply. So guess enough talking now. So what I want to do is just show you how you can start protecting your data. And we're going to do that using SQL Data Masker, which is one of the two components of SQL Provision. So SQL Provision is made up by the by Data Masker, which will protect your data, and also of SQL Clone, which will help you be I almost said agile. It's going to help you be efficient in terms of how you provision that those environments. So before we jump into Data Masker, actually, the first step that we need to take is to analyze our database schema and to identify the columns that we need to protect, right? So it's on a recent webinar that I participated with our esteemed colleague Kendra Little. She mentioned that she had the opportunity to work with a customer, and the customer shares that the responsibility of identifying those sensitive columns, those sensitive information that needs masking, was actually shared across the business, and that produced a great level of collaboration and allowed buy-in to the process from multiple stakeholders. So, and of course, it's not all on you. It doesn't have to be defining which columns, which data needs to be masked. It shouldn't rely on the single individual. It's a business decision after all. So what we have here, we're gonna use our confidential DB, and I just want to show you how's that looking like. So we have our production environment and we have our development environment. So we are querying our dev environment, and we can see that we have a multitude of data that it's sensitive, and if it's leaving production, it most definitely requires some level of masking to be done against it. So we have internal synchronization data masking that will be put in place. We also have some denormalization happening here, and we also we have a multitude of information that needs masking. I'm not going to go into much detail about how to perform every single one. I just want to show you an existing masking set that we have, and we're going to run that masking sets against our development database and see how that works. But before that, I just want to quickly show you how we would go about creating a new rule. So I intentionally left out our credit card information. So in this existing set, I'm not masking the credit card. So let's get around that. So by creating a new rule, you're going to be offered the option to choose which type of rule you want to apply. So you can, like we're gonna just plainly substitute a value with another. We could shuffle data within the table. We could insert new data if we wanted to. We could find and replace by specific values. We can mask your XML columns, or if you have JSON, we can mask that as well. We can synchronize data within the same row. We can, if you have denormalization, we can synchronize data between tables. If you have multiple databases that are dependent on each other, we can synchronize data across those databases as well. So it's a multitude of information that we can do. Once again, I don't want to get into the very technical details of how to do that, but I'm more than happy to answer any questions you might have regarding to that. And we have plenty of documentation around that as well. So it's very simple. It's a matter of finding the table that you want, finding the column that you want to mask, and then identifying on the list of data sets that we ship with the solution, identifying which one do you want to use, and then what we do, let me just bring this here. This is what we're going to sample through, and you have options to generate invalid checksums, to use unique values only. The list goes on, but again, let's just get that one done. No, I don't want another one. So I have created my rule that will be applied alongside all the other rules against my database, against my schema, and hopefully after that, we'll be able to protect our database. So what am I going to do next is run. I'm going to run the masking set. Yes, I do want to run it. We'll be able to see that I'm currently using 2 working threads. I could use up to 16 working threads to optimize the performance of that. That's done already. Didn't even touch bases on the statistics. So here we can tell how many rows do we have on our environments, how many rows have been masked, and also we will provide you with the option we'll log every activity in that regard. So we are also offering off the box a massive auditing capability to your environment. So what we're going to do is just rerun that query, and before, well, I guess I didn't grab your attention for it. I guess we can run that against the production database so you can see how that looks like in production. So in production, we have Miss Selma Grismore here, living in South Carolina, and our denormalized table also have her in there, and we have some values in our open text information. So if I just quickly jump back into our shared environment and run the same query, we'll be able to see that Selma is now Allegria, and that information is consistent across the databases. I managed to identify numbers and names in my notes open text column, and I have masked that as well. I could have just noded. She now lives in Breckenridge, and her credit card is masked. And this is just a very brief example of how easy it is to implement compliance. We don't need to put ourselves on the mercy of exposing our most valuable asset, our data, into the hands of illy intended people. So let's jump back into, so that's just one element of what we're gonna touch bases, and that is our data masker. So we just created a masking set that we're gonna use further down the track as well. So I just wanna bring your attention now to the second component of our, let me just jump in there. Hey, that's not good. I wonder if I'll be able to, yes, I will. Sorry about that, guys. So the second component, right? So the second component of SQL Provision is gonna allow us to optimize time and space. And I'm not making any analogy to the continue. It's just a simply reference to implementing provisioning strategies that are usually 85% faster and up to 99% more efficient in terms of storage requirements. I'll demonstrate in a few instances what SQL Clone does through the use of virtualization. It's providing the ability to provision full writable copies of your production database, but instead of multiple hundreds of gigs, if not terabytes, necessary to refresh your dev and test environments, each clone will require less than 100 megabytes. And that's irrelevant of the size of your database that you're cloning from. So aligned with that, it's also the benefits of eliminating the many hours that you would take to restore a single backup, which SQL Clone, will be able to provision the same databases, not in seconds, literally seconds. And again, the original size of the database is irrelevant to that speed. SQL Clone and Data Masker come together to form SQL Provision, as I mentioned, and we can combine masking sets for our database and start provisioning full copies of the databases that are now safe to be used outside production. And again, a fraction of the time and using a fraction of the storage. So another massive value adding element is the ability to enhance collaboration between developers and DBAs, because we offer you the ability, a web interface where the whole provisioning process can be managed. So we also offer you the ability to allow developers to self-serve. Once again, I'll demonstrate it, but the principles behind is that we have now created images that are fully anonymized and safe to use. What we can do then is allow our developers to tap into that image and provision their own copies of the database at their own rates, at their own needs. So one more time, enough talking. Let's see how that works. It's not magic, but it sure feels like. Let's jump into SQL Clone. What we have here is that centralized interface that I've mentioned. What I want to walk you through today is the very simple process of creating an image and creating a clone afterwards. You can create an image out of an existing backup, which it's preferable. So if you want to restore a copy of your production environment, you don't want to add any additional workload to your production solutions, your production applications, your databases. So you can point directly to a backup, or if it's not if it's urgent, you don't have a backup, we're also offering us the option to point directly to that SQL server and create our image from there, which behind the hoods is pretty much going to do a backup anyways. So I'm going to choose to do create an image out of a backup file. So I select the SQL server that I'm going to have access to that. I'm going to add the confidential database backup that I just had done before here. If you have password, if your backup is password protected, you can easily circumvent that as well if you use. You can make use of differential backups to get you closer to the most near real-time copy of your environment, depending on the size. And here is where we can apply those scripts and masking sets that we just created. So what I'm going to do is, where did I put that? Very quickly, that's the confidential DB masking sets that we've just played with. I can also add additional scripts. For instance, I'm adding a script that will amend the permissions around for my new environment. So I had one set of permissions in production. My developers didn't have access to it, but now I want them to have sysadmin access to it as an example on my development environment. So I'll continue with that. Now I'm going to choose where I want my images to be stored, and it needs to be an environment where it's accessible by the clones. So with that, I can just type in the name of my database, or my image, sorry, I'm going to call it confidential DB image, and I'm going to create it. So we are able to just follow the process. As you could see, restoration took place. Now I'm going to running my modification, my masking sets, and I'm also going to run my T-SQL that will amend that those permissions. And just like that, my image is ready. So from that image, I can just choose to create a clone where I'm going to select the image I'm going to select from the image that I have available. So in our case, our confidential DB image, I'm going to click next. I could implement further modifications, but I'm making all the modifications on the image level. If I didn't want to, I could make those modifications on the clone level. Just find that it's a bit more efficient to automate the whole thing from the beginning. So I'll skip the modifications for now. I'll choose where I want my instance to be created, and then I'm going to just give my my clone a name. So I'm just going to clone my production database, so in order to create my UAT environment. So that's it. That took like less than 5 seconds, and I have a fully operational, fully ready to use clone. Let's just quickly jump into that. I'll refresh my databases, and there you are. You have a UAT environment ready to go, and again, fully anonymized. So none of the data in here is, if a breach was to take place with that particular database, you can rest assured that you are fully compliant, your governance processes are in place, and you are safe. Just very quickly as well, I just want to quickly touch bases on something that I mentioned before, and it's the fact that the size of the database doesn't matter. It's going to take the same amount of time, and the clones will be of the same size. So I have it's still, because I'm using my own computer, I'm not gonna use a terabyte of data, even because the time to create that image would take a bit of time. So all I want to see is that out of the 20 gig image, it took seconds, as you could see. Again, the same amount of seconds, and the data and the clone is only 45 meg large, which is the same as our 100 meg database. So it took the same amount of time, and it's the same amount of space required. So it doesn't matter if it's 100 meg, 100 gig, 10 terabytes, the clones will be provisioned with the same speed and require the same amount of space. So that's how we put them together. Let's see if it worked this time. So now it's all fantastic. We see how we're getting closer to where the goal is, where the value is. So we managed to create our masking sets. We managed to use those masking sets to provision our environments. We saw how fast it is. We saw how much space it's required. So it's virtually very little amount of space required. That's all fantastic. So how can we um, how can how can we become even more efficient? So now my devs can work on realistic data and my deployments are more accurate and reliable because my test environment is as close to prod-like as compliance permits. So we have combined that ability to provision non-prod environments with minimal infrastructure tax at blazing fast speeds. So what I want to show now is how can we raise the bar of efficiency even higher by automating the compliance database provisioning using our good old friend PowerShell. So let me just bring that up, and it's SQL Clone has its own sets of scriptlets. So it's just a matter of installing that module, and you'll be able to make use of PowerShell to automate your process. And I just want to show you how easy it is, how intuitive it is. Here I'm just saying where my clone environment is by pointing to the URL of my central interface. I'm telling where my instance is. I'm telling where to store my images. I'm masking by pointing to the very same masking sets that we just used. So we're going to use the same masking sets. I am naming my image. I am telling where to get the backup from. Here is the environments that we're going to use. I'm going to create a dev environment for me, for my good friend Kendra, and as well as create 2 new environments. And that's it. So this is all, if you can call it, like just setting the variables, and here is where the action actually works. So it's very easy, very simple approach to automating what up to now is a super intensive, laborious activity that no one would take any pleasure of doing. And now it's a click of a button. So let me just quickly jump back into SQL Clone. That should have started the process of creating the image. It did. So now we have this confidential masked image taking place in prod. I'm applying my mask. The image has been created. Now the clones are getting created. So mine is done. Kendra's done. Kendra's is done. We have my test environment and I have my QA environment done like that. I don't think it took 20 seconds, and that is done. Obviously, the amount of time that it would take to create that image, the image creation is relevant to the size of your database. Yes, but that's why we want to automate it. We want to do that after hours. So when we get into work, our clones are ready to be provisioned, ready to be used. So let's jump back into to SSMS, refresh our databases, and like that, you can see that our confidential DB, our production database is there. Obviously, what I'm demonstrating here, I have all the databases in the same instance, not ideal, purely from the purpose of demonstration. So I have my confidential DB, I have my shared dev environments there, and now I have my my dedicated dev environment, and also I have my QA, my tests, and my UAT, which are exact copies of production. So which is so empowering to have this ability to provision those environments like that. So that's it. PowerShell helping us get more efficient, becoming heroes, just like that. So the next thing that I wanted to bring your attention to is it's this shift left approach. So and what that means is we want to be able to move away from those shared environments. So we touched bases earlier about how inconvenient it is sometimes to have to keep worrying about what change, if the changes you're making will influence others, locking objects, that whole thing that like interferes with the quality and agility of your development process. So dedicated development environments are, are glorious to work with, but the havoc to provision and maintain those environments um, um, are extremely painful. So the amount of effort necessary to create, to multiply a database, to anonymize it, and provision each developer with its own copy of the database, it's a troublesome task. And that's why we're still seeing the database development lagging behind in terms of, in comparison with what we're seeing in the application development world. All right. So I guess it's just a little bonus topic where I want to show you in practical terms for those who are currently using shared environments. So if you are working on shared environments and you are already source controlling of your development database, you are ahead of the curve of a lot of current business, but there are still further evolution process to follow through, and that is that transition is the start to really getting benefit from this new reality that comes in front of us, the ability to work in dedicated development environments. So how do we do that? Let me just show you. You you probably noticed some of the database icons here are green, and that is our SQL source control in play. Like I said, this is outside SQL provision, but I just want to show you how that works in practical terms. So I had my shared database in source control, but I also, and I did that beforehand, added the development, my personal development database to source control. So how did that come about? How the database is now all suddenly linked to source control? It's one of the reasons why it's so useful to take on to this approach. So if I click on it and just go to source control, I can see that this is my local repository for my in this example, my TFS environment. So my database is in source control. If I start to make changes here, I'll be able to commit those changes very quickly, and I'll just create a, let's say, let me just maybe, yeah, let's just create a table, shall we? So I'll just create a table, demo table. It's the world's most simple table, and there's no constraint. There's nothing there. I just want to quickly get to the process of getting something changed into my schema. And now all I want to do is jump into source control. I am looking at my environments, and I'm going to pick up that change. I'm just going to quickly commit that change across to source control. And what I want to demonstrate is that now I don't have to worry too much. Oh, I didn't push that change through. So I committed to my local repository, but I didn't commit that change through. Hope that's not going to be a problem. Yes, great. So I can push that to my remote repository now. And what I can do is, as soon as that's finished, jumping to, so let's say I've made a change, and now Kendra, it's gonna, she's working on her environment. All she needs to do is get the latest changes from source control and start working on her environment just there. Let me just check if that has made through my repository. That's probably the reason why it's so slow. It took a while. demo table. It just reached. So if I jump back in, there you go. If I jump into my other development environment, it's just a matter of getting the latest change, reviewing, make sure that it's in there, and pulling that from the repository. Yes, and what's going to happen next is that environment is going to contain the latest change that I have just made. So now we're collaborating, and we don't have to worry too much about branching. That's one of the reasons why branching takes place. So you can, if you're working on shared environments, you need to be able to isolate yourself in your development. So now you can do that from using clone, and working on those isolated environments is extremely easy. So if I jump back here, let me just quickly refresh and expand, we should see that demo table just there. So one other thing that I can do is let's simulate that I have reached the end of my deployment cycle, and we're going to refresh the image. We're going to refresh the clones as well. What I can do, again, through automation, or we can do it manually, or I can do it through automation. We can just clean up that, and what's going to happen is all my clones are going to be removed, as well as my image. Once again, I'm just going to quickly show. Let me just go into SQL clone. I'll be able to show. Did that run through? Okay, it's running. So the image prod has just been deleted. This is the image that I created manually. It got confused. So that is done. Just SSMS seemed to have frozen, which is not ideal. But what I can do while I just want to show. Yes, there you go. They're all gone. All we have is the manual image that I've created, as well as the two that were already there. So when I go through the new deployment cycle and I go through the same process and create my new images, which obviously for due to the context of this demonstration will be exactly the same. But let's imagine that the backup file that we have contains obviously new changes in terms of data that took place in production. So now I have just pushed all those changes back into my development environment extremely easily, extremely efficient. And now the whole point of this is I want to show you that I don't have to re-add my development database to source control. That's going to be automatically done. It's very, very efficient process, life-changing. It raised the bar to a whole new level, and it's so easy. Well, the last thing that I wanted to show you guys is I briefly touched base on self-provision. So what we can do is we have the ability to give developers or groups, individual users or groups, granular levels within SQL clone. So in this example, I'm saying that this user, developer, Mr. Developer, he can only create clones. So when he comes to SQL clone, he will have access to this interface, but then he will not have the image creation option. All he will have is the ability to create clones. So let's say I go in here and I do something very silly, like updating, not in master. If I, where am I? Here. So if I update my customer table, right now going, because I can't type. So if I update my customer table, let's say set first name equals Anderson. And I ignore my prompts and I execute that anyway. So now all of a sudden I have just changed my whole customer table. I say, oh my God, what did I just do? I don't have to go and re-provision my whole environment. I can very easy. I don't have to um, uh, issue a new request for my DBA to come on. Can you just create a new database for me, please? So mess up. You can just go and reset that environment, which will do exactly that. We'll get rid of the clone, and let's say all the changes you've made are in source control, so you don't have to worry about that. You can just reset your clone. Now all of that information is back because it's a database like it was at the beginning. And like I've mentioned, if I have made any changes, I don't have to worry about it. It's just a matter of grabbing those changes back from source control. Going. It's calculating now. So it's just going to do a comparison against my database and what we have in source control. So I should have that demo table showing up. I should. Don't. I'll investigate why. But I just wanted to say that that's something came about there. There you go. I'm removing that. So it's a very straightforward process. It's easy to use. It's comprehensive. It's changing the way your business perceives database development. If you are involved on the operational side, I hope you can see how much these practices can enhance your ability to focus on doing the things that you want to do, that you believe that will add more value to the organization, instead of just restoring backups, applying scripts, not having compliance around everything that you're doing, not having visibility around which database you have deployed where, when. So all these compliance requirements are immediately answered, immediately addressed with this approach. If you're on the development side, I hope you could also see that it's not a massive task to move away from shared environments to dedicated environments, but it's absolutely a massive benefit from doing so. So you're gonna start reaping the benefits of becoming efficient, independent. You don't have to worry about if what you're doing is gonna affect the environment, and in that case require new reprovisioning. So you are free to do all the work that you always wanted to. And again, how can we do that in an automated manner? How can we shift away from starting to grab those errors on the right side of the development pipeline and moving to the left side and starting to grab all those potential issues at the very early stages of development is extremely valuable. So let me just have a quick look about the questions that we have so far. So it's really good to see you guys collaborating here. One of the questions that I have is if my database is okay, it's about the size limit about your database. So the size limit, it's 64 terabytes. So that's the limits in which your database can be and we can work with. In terms of the question that we have here is in terms of how long does it take to mask. So it's a very reasonable question because we are using static masking approach. We're actually replacing the values in the columns. The amount of time that it takes, it's directly related with the amount of values that we want to mask. But what Data Masker does is it has all this built-in intelligence and features that will allow you to disable triggers, disable indexes, create indexes in the fly if you don't have any, disable those if that's the case. We can work with multiple working threads. What we're seeing around our customer base is an extreme level of satisfaction of manipulating, masking that data in comparison to any other sort of obfuscation scripts that you might have, because we are precise in which columns you want to mask. We're making the most out of it in terms of efficiency, and again, like I brought up before, in terms of auditing and compliance terms as well. We'll provide you with a log, the ability to track who triggers the masking, when, to which database, what the number of rows that have been applied against the number of rows that were existing in the database. So it's a full visibility to what you have. I only had those two questions. If you do have any other question, please punch that in. But I am also aware that we are coming close to the end of our time allocated. I'm very pleased to have such a large number of attendees. It's really, really cool. And also, I see it as a privilege. So thank you all for your time. I just have another question popping in. What is an image and what is a clone? The image is that snapshot in time where we are going to grab a copy of your database, and we're going to create a virtual disk pretty much of that database, and the clones will be the differential disks that are going to point to that source. But in terms of databases, like if you're looking through SSMS, a clone is a database. It has all the data that your original database has. It has all the properties as well. It actually, the one way to identify a clone is through an extended property that will identify that it's a SQL clone. But it has the full functionality. You can use it, the full spectrum of a database through your SQL clones. And I guess that's it. Thank you all very much again. I really do appreciate it. I do value your time. I'm just gonna bring up the fact that I'm super keen to answer any questions that you might have. Let me just manually go back here. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. That's my email address. That's my LinkedIn. If you wanna connect, just shoot me a request. It's my absolute pleasure. Is the only reason I do what I do is to help businesses evolve and become more efficiency in their processes. Thank you very much. I hope you had a great day, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.